The story of Paul Clifford begins in a place of absolute desperation. It opens with the death of a woman in a destitute setting, leaving behind a young child who looks entirely out of place in such misery. This child, Paul, has a high-born appearance that suggests a life of privilege, but his reality is the opposite. He is taken in and raised by Mrs. Marjorie Peggy Lobkins, who runs an inn called The Mug. For a long time, Paul is just a mischievous boy with a sharp mind and a talent for what the book calls prank theft. He isn't malicious, but he is clever, and he finds a certain thrill in the game of taking things. Mrs. Lobkins, wanting the best for the boy and hoping to steer him away from a life of crime, hires a tutor named Matt Grawler. This is where Paul's intellectual curiosity really takes off. He is introduced to the world of journalism through a man named Augustus Tomlinson. Journalism in this era isn't just about reporting facts, it is a sensationalist, glamorous, and often manipulative world. Paul is drawn to it because it offers a glimpse of a higher social stratum. As he grows into a young man, Paul becomes obsessed with social mobility. He doesn't just want to be successful, he wants to be perceived as a gentleman. This desire for status becomes Paul's undoing. He begins to spend lavishly, buying the clothes and maintaining the lifestyle of a man of means, even though he doesn't have the money to support it. He is essentially building a facade, a lie that he hopes will eventually become his truth. But the gap between his appearance and his bank account grows too wide. Desperate for income to keep up the act, Paul turns to literary criticism. He writes under the pseudonym Nobilitas, a name that literally means nobility. He works for the cynical McGrawler, but the relationship is parasitic. McGrawler exploits Paul's talent, skimming off his earnings and keeping him in a state of financial instability, while Paul continues to chase the ghost of a gentlemanly life. Eventually, the facade collapses. Paul is pushed to a breaking point where his desperation outweighs his morals. He gets caught up in a robbery orchestrated by a flamboyant criminal known as Long Ned or Pepper. This is the turning point of Paul's life. He is arrested and thrown into Bridewell, a brutal house of correction. Prison is where Paul is truly hardened. He encounters the ramping rituals of the inmates, a violent system of hierarchy and bullying designed to break a man's spirit. However, Paul isn't entirely alone. Augustus Tomlinson, the man from his journalism days, provides a strange kind of protection. Tomlinson is a philosophical opportunist, a man who views the world as a series of games to be played. Together, they orchestrate a daring escape during a heavy fog, leaving the prison walls behind and casting Paul into the life of a fugitive. Now a man on the run, Paul finds a new kind of family among the lads of the cross at a place called the Jolly Angler. These are the highwaymen of the road, men who live by their wits and their pistols. Paul doesn't just join them, he excels. He adopts the persona of Captain Lovett, a sophisticated outlaw who can navigate both the criminal underworld and the drawing rooms of high society. This duality defines the middle of the story. By day, or in the right clothes, he is a man of charm and intellect. By night, he is a predator on the road. It is during this precarious time that Paul falls deeply in love with Lucy Brandon. Lucy is the ward of William Brandon, a powerful and calculating lawyer. She is the embodiment of innocence and steadfastness, and for Paul, she represents the life he actually wants, a life of genuine virtue and love, rather than the manufactured status he chased as a young man. But Paul's life is a tightrope walk. He is terrified that his criminal associations will be discovered, and he feels the crushing weight of his own hypocrisy. He loves Lucy, but he is lying to her every single day. As the story progresses, the focus shifts to the man who holds Lucy's fate in his hands, William Brandon. To the public, Brandon is a pillar of rectitude, a man of immense ambition and legal brilliance, but the novel peels back the curtain to reveal a darker truth. William Brandon is actually a man named Welford. He built his entire prestigious reputation on a foundation of lies and a hidden, scandalous past. Years ago, he had a wife and a son, but he abandoned them in a ruthless pursuit of power and social standing. His former wife, left in destitution, cast a curse upon him, predicting that he would lose the very legacy he spent his life trying to build. This curse manifests in a tragic way. Long ago, Brandon's son was kidnapped during a robbery. Brandon spent years pretending to be the grieving, noble guardian of his niece, Lucy, while hiding the fact that his own life was a fraud. The irony here is thick and intentional. Now, Paul Clifford has been spending his life pretending to be a gentleman while being a criminal, William Brandon has been pretending to be a gentleman while being a moral criminal. One steals purses on the road, the other steals lives and legacies through the law. The plot eventually converges in a collision of these two worlds. Through a series of revelations, it is discovered that Paul Clifford is not just some random orphan from the mug. He is the lost son of Welford, the very child William Brandon lost and the legacy he sought to protect through deception. The boy who was raised in the gutters of London and became a highwayman is the rightful heir to the man who represents the pinnacle of legal authority. But the revelation comes too late to save Paul from the law. He is captured and sentenced to death. The tension reaches a peak as Paul faces the gallows, his life a testament to the tragedy of circumstance. He was born to nobility but shaped by poverty, betrayal, and the brutalizing influence of the prison system. However, the cycle of hypocrisy is finally broken. Lord Mauleverer, a man who had been entangled in Brandon's schemes, is moved by remorse. He sees the truth of Brandon's corruption and the tragedy of Paul's life. Mauleverer petitions for mercy, and Paul's death sentence is commuted to transportation. He is sent away from England to start a new life in exile. The novel ends with the collapse of William Brandon. His death is a grim, solitary affair. He dies unmourned, his hollow character finally catching up with him. The man who spent his entire existence constructing a perfect public image ends up as nothing. When we look at Paul Clifford as a whole, it's really a study of the masks people wear. The most striking theme is the hypocrisy of social class. The author is making a very specific argument here that the polished behavior of the aristocracy in the legal profession is often just a more sophisticated version of the crimes committed by outlaws. A highwayman steals a coach with a pistol, which is obvious and illegal. But a man like William Brandon steals a family's future and builds a career on a lie, and society calls him a gentleman. The book suggests that the real frauds aren't the ones in the prisons, but the ones sitting in the high courts. There is also the classic tension of nature versus nurture. Paul is born with a noble spirit and a high intellect, his nature. But he is raised in the slums, exploited by a tutor, and broken by a house of correction, his nurture. The story asks if a person can ever truly escape the environment that shapes them. Paul spends the entire book trying to climb a social ladder, only to realize that the ladder is leaning against a rotten wall. And the role of reputation is also central. In the world of the novel, a name is everything. Paul creates the name Nobilitas to get respect. He creates the name Captain Lovett to survive the road. William Brandon creates the identity of a noble lawyer to hide his past. The book shows how easily public perception can be manufactured through the press and legal maneuvering. It argues that reputation is often a shield used to hide the truth. Finally, there is the idea of redemption through exile. Paul cannot find peace or honor in England because he is too tied to his past and the social structures that failed him. His transportation, while a punishment, is actually a form of liberation. By stripping away his social identity, by losing his name, his status, and his country, he is finally able to be an honest man. He has to lose everything to find his true self. In the end, Paul Clifford is a story about the tragedy of a man who was told he was nothing, tried to pretend he was something, and only found peace when he accepted that the social games of the world are a fraud. It's a bleak look at the 19th century class system, but it's balanced by the genuine emotional connection between Paul and Lucy, suggesting that while social structures are corrupt, individual love and loyalty are the only things that are actually real.